Hey everyone, it's Ian from the Postal Hub podcast here, and Dean Maciuba from Logistics, Trends and Insights is on the line. He and I have just been talking about carrier agnostic parcel lockers and how that could work in the USA. So look for that very soon on the Postal Hub podcast. But Dean, right now we're going to have a really quick chat about the US Postal Service because it's been in the news just a little bit. Now, for those of us outside the USA, is it really that big a deal? Is it a headline grabber that it seems to be from outside the USA?
Ian, it is a big deal because changes at the USPS are going to impact nearly all Americans, both from a consumer standpoint and business standpoint. So some people are suggesting this topic is getting more attention right now than even our pending presidential election that's supposed to take place in November.
And who could possibly believe that the US Postal Service could, overshadow President Trump? Quite amazing. Now, the new Postmaster General has been in for about 2 months, but he has a logistics background. Dean, is he running the post office? I'll get in a second, everybody. The US Postal Service like a post, or is he running it more like one of the private carriers, like a UPS or a FedEx? What do you reckon?
I think he's implementing radical change very quickly that does, in fact, reflect how a private carrier would run their business versus a quasi-governmental postal authority. A couple examples of that would be they're now observing cut times at operation centers and at post offices so things don't run late and they don't see excessive overtime as a result. UPS and FedEx have been strictly observing their cutoff times as it applies to operations forever. So that's a great example of how he is starting to run the USPS, very similar to the way UPS and FedEx operate. We've heard a lot of things in the news about mailboxes being relocated, about high-speed sorting machines being removed. And again, these are things that the carriers do all the time. They constantly assess the performance of their drop boxes, and they're constantly looking for ways to gain efficiencies. I think the deal here is that the change is radical, and the post office isn't used to this type of radical change, and that's why we're seeing a lot of pushback from the postal organization itself.
So there's a lot of interest in it from people inside the sector, whether it's the unions and so on, politicians. And when politicians get involved, I always get worried that bad decisions might get made because good decision-making can sometimes be sacrificed at the altar of short-term political thinking. I know that's a broad, sweeping statement, everybody, but that's just my take on things and my observations of postal operators over the years and how they've had to respond to politicians dipping their oars in. Dean, there are sort of some of the bigger questions being asked at the moment about the US Postal Service are things like how the taxpayer should or should not fund the postal service, things like that. Just really quickly, because you come from a parcels background, you're a FedEx man from way back. Do you think this has sort of any implications? These goings on at the moment, which seem to be focused more on letters, does it have any implications for parcels going forward?
I think we have to get away from the politics. And there's politics here from a government standpoint on the left and right. And even there's political implications for management within the USPS because, their cheese is being moved right now. And obviously you're going to have some USPS professionals that aren't really happy about this kind of change that actually may result in a lower level of service. So I understand that there's a lot of consternation out there about the way this is going. But when it comes to service, this is what we need to do in the U.S. We need to decide if the USPS should be subsidized by the taxpayers and the government to support a certain level of service. And then we need to define what that level of service should be. So let's get away from the politics. Let's analyze what's going on. We can learn from these radical changes that have just occurred that have resulted in a lot of pushback. And then let's decide what kind of service the U.S. citizen requires and be able to provide that service in a cost-effective fashion.
Dean, that is a great point. A great question. What does the US citizen, those people living in the USA, what do they really want from their postal service? And, well, everybody, comment below. Let's join the conversation. Keep it civil. Keep the politics out of it if we can. But what should the future of the postal service in the USA be, whether it's regard to letters or parcels or whatever it might be? Very interesting discussion to have. Dean Maciuba from Logistics Trends and Insights, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ian.